it's Jonathan, and welcome to a special video. Today is the 4th of July, which is Independence Day in the United States. More specifically, today is the 245th anniversary of the ratification and publishing of the United States Declaration of Independence, the document that established the United States of America as an independent country from Great Britain, even though Great Britain did not recognize the U.S. as independent until the American Revolutionary War ended in 1783. Although the American Revolution started out as a fight for self-government within Great Britain and against what the Americans called taxation without representation, the Declaration of Independence resulted in the fight becoming one over the creation of a new country. Although the document was ratified on July 4, 1776, the date that is now associated with the Declaration of Independence, the vote by the Second Continental Congress, the revolutionary legislature of the time, to approve it took place on July 2nd. In fact, Continental Congress delegate and future second U.S. President John Adams thought that it would be the most memorable epoch in the history of America. However, as tradition would turn out, July 4th would go on to become the USA's Independence Day, and so the United States turns 245 years old today. In this video, I'll grieve a reading? However, as tradition would turn out, July 4th would go on to become the USA's Independence Day, and so the United States turns 245 years old today. In this video, I'll give a reading of this influential document, not just American history, but also world history. Now, let's begin with this reading. In Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one's people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with one another, and to assume among the powers of the earth a separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles, and organizing its powers in such form, as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments, long established, should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty, to throw off such government, and to provide new gods for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws, though most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be attained, and when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable and distant from the depository of their public works, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly, for opposing with manly firmness of his invasion on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time after such dissolutions to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers incapable of annihilation have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states for that purpose obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of land. He has obstructed his administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices, and the amount in payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices, and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution, and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefit of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offences, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighbouring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its borders so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our government, for suspending our own legislatures, and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections among us, and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by a repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these United Colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. New Hampshire, Josiah Bartlett, William Whipple, Matthew Thornton. Massachusetts, Samuel Adams, John Hancock, Robert Treat Payne. Elbridge Gerry. Rhode Island, Stephen Hopkins, William Ellery. Connecticut, Roger Sherman, Samuel Huntington, William Williams, Oliver Wolcott. New York, William Floyd, Philip Livingston, Francis Lewis, Lewis Morris. New Jersey, Richard Stockton, John Witherspoon, Francis Hopkinson, John Hart, Abraham Clark. Pennsylvania, Robert Morris, Benjamin Rush, Benjamin Franklin, John Morton, George Clymer, James Smith, George Taylor, James Wilson, George Ross. Delaware, George Reed, Caesar Rodney, Thomas McKean. Maryland, Samuel Chase, William Packer, Thomas Stone, Charles Carroll of Carrollton. Virginia, George Wythe, Richard Henry Lee, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Harrison, Thomas Nelson Jr., Francis Lightfoot Lee, Carter Braxton. North Carolina, William Hooper, Joseph Hughes, John Penn. South Carolina, Edward Rutledge, Thomas Hayward Jr., Thomas Lynch Jr., Arthur Middleton. Georgia, Button Gwinnett, Lyman Hall, George Walton. And now you know the text of this iconic document, the United States Declaration of Independence, and by extension the United States itself, would go on to influence world history in various ways. This influence is directly felt in the fact that the United States would later become the third largest country by land area throughout the 19th century, and a great power after World War I, before becoming one of the only two world superpowers after World War I. Then, as you already know, after 44 years of Cold War, the only other world superpower of the time, the Soviet Union, would dissolve in 1991, leaving the United States to become the world's only current superpower, a position that is so powerful that some people have even proposed coining the term hyperpower just to describe the United States. The influence of the United States Declaration of Independence, as well as the Constitution that the United States would later adopt in 1787, also influenced history in other ways, with many more revolutions over the years, drawing inspiration from the American Revolution. France's Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, written in 1789, drew heavy inspiration from the United States, as did the unsuccessful 1825 Decembrist revolt in Russia, whose participants are even described as Russian Americanophiles. The United States Declaration of Independence also influenced the declarations of independence of many other countries, including Haiti in 1804, Venezuela in 1811, many other Latin American countries throughout the 1811 to 1842 period, Texas and California in 1836, the Dominican Republic in 1844, Hungary in 1849, and Czechoslovakia in 1918. Even North Vietnam's Declaration of Independence in 1945 quoted the preamble to the United States Declaration of Independence and the Declaration of the Rights of Man as part of its rhetoric justifying North Vietnam's existence. Very ironic considering its later reputation of fighting a war with France and the United States. All of that is not to mention the influence that the system that the United States would adopt with the US Constitution in 1787 would have on the systems of many other countries, as evident in the fact that the terms President and Congress are associated with the executive and legislative branches exactly because those are the names given to the executive and legislative branches in the United States itself. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like on it. If you enjoyed this entire channel, subscribe to it. And if you want to know when the next video will be coming out, click the bell button after you subscribe. And I'll see you in the next video.